Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take the sources you've shared and really drill down to give you that core knowledge, a shortcut to being truly well-informed.
And today, we are tackling an absolutely massive figure.
We really are. We're doing a deep dive into someone whose life was just this constant tug of war, a battle between high art and street violence, between revolution and celebrity. We're talking about Tupac Shakur.
The sources you've pulled together, they paint such an intricate portrait. It's impossible to talk about Tupac without hitting that central paradox he lived.
Right.
Here's a man who is, widely seen as one of the most influential rappers of all time, a key voice for Black America's political struggles.
And at the very same time, he's the face of gangster rap.
Exactly. Synonymous with legal trouble, with lyrics just saturated in rage and violence. It's a fundamental contradiction.
And that's exactly what we're here to unpack. Our mission today is to trace his life using these sources. We're going to go from his revolutionary family and his formal arts training,
all the way through his explosive commercial success, his legal battles,
to his tragic death, and then this enduring global legacy that honestly still resonates so powerfully today. It's a journey from the Black Panther Party in Harlem to, the bright lights of Las Vegas Boulevard.
And that journey, it translated directly into just astonishing commercial power. Before we get into the poetry and the politics, we have to set the scale here.
Yeah, the numbers are staggering.
The sources confirm he sold over 75 million records worldwide. That puts him in the top tier of best-selling musical artists of all time, period.
And that success isn't just about the sheer volume. It's about the depth, the staying power. When we talk about his legacy, we're talking about multiple diamond-certified albums.
Which is so rare in hip-hop.
Incredibly rare. And just so you, the listener, are clear, diamond status means selling 10 million units in the United States alone. That level of commercial penetration decades later is almost unheard of.
And that massive success, it sort of forced his mainstream cultural acceptance. It was cemented, really, in 2017.
When he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
In his very first year of eligibility. That's a huge statement. It means his work is no longer just analyzed as hip-hop history. It's foundational American culture.
Okay, so let's unpack this. To really understand how the revolutionary grew into the icon, we have to start at the very beginning, with his family and with his name.
Absolutely. Tupac's story is rooted not in the music industry, but right in the heart of the radical Black Power movement of the late 60s and early 70s.
He was actually born Lycine Parish Crooks in East Harlem, 1971.
But his mother, Afeni Shakur, she changed his name very quickly.
And that name change, it wasn't just a name change, it was a political act. A manifesto, really. She renamed him Tupac Amaru Shakur.
After Tupac Amaru II, an 18th century Inca revolutionary.
Who led this indigenous revolt against Spanish colonial rule in Peru and was, brutally executed for it. By giving him that name, Afeni was making sure her son carried the weight of a global history of resistance from the moment he had an identity.
And the personal context around his birth is... well, it's probably the most shocking detail in the sources.
It's unbelievable.
His mother, Afeni, and his biological father, Billy Garland, they were both highly active members of the New York Black Panther Party. Afeni, in particular, was an incredibly intense political figure.
And to really understand that intensity, you have to look at the Panther 21.
Yes.
She was one of them. A group of Black Panther leaders facing... what was it, over 150 charges?
Over 150 charges of conspiracy to bomb police stations, department stores. This was a massive, highly politicized trial. The prosecution was basically trying to decapitate the entire Black Panther leadership in New York.
And here's the defining detail.
She was acquitted.
Of everything.
Okay.
Stunning victory against the state. And this happened just 1 month before Tupac was born.
Just think about that. You enter the world and your mother has just fought and won a legal war against the U.S. government on that scale. This environment of activism, of resistance, of direct confrontation. It wasn't a phase for him. It was literally his DNA.
And the family tree just gets more radical from there. It extends into the Black Liberation Army.
Right. His stepfather, Mutulu Shakur, he was convicted for his part in that 1981 Brinks armored truck robbery.
A crime that left 2 police officers and a guard dead. And he was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list for 4 years before they caught him.
And then you have his godmother and step-aunt, Assata Shakur. Her story just underscores the sheer intensity of this world.
Convicted of the murder of a New Jersey state trooper, escaped from prison in '79.
And remained on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list, classified as a terrorist right up until the date the source gives as her death in 2025. You have to understand, this wasn't just political disagreement. This was a family defined by revolution, by incarceration, by armed conflict with the state.
What's so fascinating, though, is how this revolutionary fire gets channeled through this really unexpected and elite artistic education.
Yes.
In the mid-'80s, even with his mother's struggles with addiction and, finding work, the family moves to Baltimore,
Hmm.
and Tupac enrolls in the Baltimore School for the Arts.
And this is that critical aha moment. The part of the story that often gets lost in the later gangsta narrative. He studied acting, poetry, jazz, even ballet.
Ballet. It's not the background you expect, is it? He completely immersed himself in classical arts.
And his poetry was already getting noticed, but the sources show a deeper intellectual thing happening. He was performing in Shakespeare plays.
And he said later that he saw the same patterns. The power struggles, the betrayal, the tragedy. He saw all that in the street warfare around him that he was reading in Hamlet or Macbeth.
The art school literally gave him the language and the structure for tragedy, and he would later apply that directly to his lyrics.
This period also shows his political side wasn't just inherited. He was actively engaged.
He connected with the Baltimore Young Communist League USA. He even dated the daughter of the local Communist Party director.
So you see this articulate young man who can just move seamlessly between classical theater and high-level political ideology. He's comfortable in both worlds.
And crucially, it was at the School for the Arts that he formed this profound lifelong bond with Jada Pinkett.
A friendship that really seems to have been an anchor for him through everything that came later.
Absolutely. He wrote poems for her. The sources mention Jada and the tears in Cupid's eyes, and she tried to help him through his worst legal crises. She even apparently turned down his marriage proposal when he was incarcerated at Rikers Island.
That relationship, that deep, non-romantic intimacy and artistic connection, it's such an important counterbalance to the hard persona he built later on.
It speaks directly to the poet that was always underneath the revolutionary. It just proves the complexity was there from a very, very young age.
So we have the foundation, right? Born into political fire, trained in the discipline of high art. The revolutionary poet needed a stage. How did he go from playing the Mouse King in the Nutcracker to becoming the global megastar Tupac?
Well, his start in the professional music world was actually pretty humble, but his drive just made everything happen so fast. He started recording around 1988 as MC New York.
But the real break came when he linked up with the manager, Atron Gregory.
Right, and that led him to the Oakland-based group Digital Underground in 1990. And his role was, well, he was basically a hype man.
A roadie and a backup dancer. He officially debuted as Tupac on their 1991 single, Same Song. If you go back and watch that video, he's just kind of in the background.
But even then, people around him knew something was different. His early producer, Jimmy Chopmaster J. Dwight, he said Shakur just didn't work as part of a group. He said, and this is a quote, "This guy was on a mission from day one."
Wow. Maybe he knew he wasn't going to be around 7 years later. That's a chilling observation.
It is, and that relentless focus just immediately pushed him towards a solo career.
Which manifested in his debut solo album, Tupacalypse Now, in late '91. And that title alone, a direct reference to Apocalypse Now, it just set the stage for this brutal, unfiltered look at America.
The album was pure political commentary. It drew right from his family's lineage, from his experiences, the songs tackling racism, police brutality, poverty, gang violence, all of it.
It immediately made him this central, unapologetic voice of dissent in West Coast hip-hop. He was rejecting the more, party-focused stuff that was popular at the time.
And the backlash that followed wasn't just some industry chatter. It went all the way to the top of the government.
A murder case in Texas. The defense claimed the themes on the album influenced the perpetrator. And that's when then Vice President Dan Quayle stepped in.
Quayle publicly condemned the album. He said, specifically, "There's no reason for a record like this to be released. It has no place in our society."
Which, of course, was the best thing that could have possibly happened for Tupac's career.
Absolutely. It didn't silence him. It gave him instant credibility as an anti-establishment icon. He became the lightning rod for all the media anxiety about the people he was rapping for.
And despite that political firestorm, or maybe because of it, the album's impact on other artists was just seismic. The sources say rappers like Nas, Eminem, Talib Kweli, they all cite Tupacalypse Now as a formative inspiration.
And that track, Brenda's Got a Baby, that somber, poetic story about a teenage girl's struggles, it showed he could mix that political critique with a real, genuine empathy.
His commercial profile then just explodes with the second album, Strictly for My NIGGAZ in 1993. This is where he masters the art of keeping that political edge while also making hits.
Big hits. I Get Around gave him massive mainstream visibility. It hit number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100.
But importantly, this is also the album with Keep Ya Head Up, that powerful women's empowerment anthem. It showed his range. He could do party tracks and deeply conscientious material on the same record, a really rare balancing act.
And the album went platinum by 1995.
And at the exact same time all this is happening, his film career is taking off.
He's a legitimate actor. He got starring roles in Juice in '92, where Rolling Stone called him the film's most magnetic figure.
Then Poetic Justice with Janet Jackson and Above the Rim in '94. He was on a roll.
But this is also where that volatility, that rage from the lyrics, starts to spill over into his real life. It wasn't just a performance.
He was cast in Menace: The Second Society, but then got into a physical fight with the director, Alan Hughes. Assaulted him.
And that one incident led to 15 days in jail in 1994, and it just significantly derailed his film ambitions. The studios got scared.
Right. John Singleton, who directed him in Poetic Justice, had cast him in his next film, Higher Learning.
But the studio refused to finance the movie with Tupac in it after his arrest. He lost the role because his legal instability became a financial liability. This pattern, brilliant creation followed by self-destruction, it becomes the defining story.
And that pattern just hits its absolute peak when his third album, Me Against the World, is released in March 1995 while he's in prison.
And this album, created at his absolute lowest point, is now widely hailed as his magnum opus, his masterpiece.
It broke records.
Yeah.
Debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, set the highest first-week sales for a solo male rapper at the time. The symbolism is just so powerful.
I mean, an artist hitting his greatest commercial success while he's incarcerated. It's the ultimate narrative, right? The system tries to crush the voice of the struggle, and that voice just gets louder.
And that time in prison, it triggered a really deep intellectual shift in him.
The sources are clear on this. He turned to heavy reading. He was devouring classical works like Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince.
And Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
And these were not casual reads. He was studying them. Machiavelli is all about how a ruler, a prince, must use cunning, ruthlessness, deception, just to survive in a hostile world. Sun Tzu is the ultimate guide to military strategy.
This sparked a whole new interest for him in philosophy and strategic conflict. It completely transformed his perspective.
And this reading led directly to the creation of his alter ego, Machiavelli. If the prince taught him that ruthlessness was necessary for power, then all the music he made after his release just embodied that philosophy. He started applying military strategy to his beefs.
And in the middle of all this philosophical transformation, from prison, he releases Dear Mama,
which becomes the album's lead single. It tops the Hot Rap Singles chart, goes platinum, and is eventually added to the Library of Congress National Recording Registry.
An incredible emotional success. It proves that even while he was literally fighting the world, he still had this capacity for deep, personal reflection and love.
You can see the evolution so clearly in the sources, from political commentator to commercial star, and then finally to this philosophical warrior forged in the fire of his own legal and criminal battles.
And those battles from 1993 on, they just start to dominate everything. The legal issues and the violent clashes, they weren't distractions from his career anymore.
No, they became the central engine. They drove his final and most commercially successful music.
Let's start with the Atlanta shooting incident in October of '93. It just perfectly illustrates how impossible it was to separate Tupac, the person, from Tupac the icon.
He was arrested for allegedly shooting two off-duty police officers, Mark and Scott Whitwell.
The plea account was that it started over an argument about them jaywalking, that his car almost hit them.
But the sources also detail witness accounts that tell a very different story. They claimed the officers were harassing a black motorist, that they used racial slurs, and that they actually fired the first shots,
forcing Tupac and his crew to defend themselves.
And that conflict in the evidence, it just reflects that deep, systemic distrust Tupac was always rapping about.
In the end, prosecutors dropped all the charges, which tells you the evidence was just too messy to go forward.
But the financial fallout was still huge. One of the officers resigned, and later, a $2 million civil default judgment was entered against Shakur's estate. Even when he was acquitted, the legal troubles were incredibly costly.
And then just a month later, the situation gets even more serious with the sexual assault case in November '93.
This is the case that, for a decade, probably more than any other, defined his public image. He was accused of sodomizing a woman, Ayanna Jackson, in his hotel room with a couple of his associates.
The verdict, which came in February '95, was actually pretty complex, and that part often gets forgotten.
It really does. He was acquitted of the most severe charges, the sodomy and the gun charges. But he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree sexual assault.
Specifically for, and I'm quoting the sources here, forcibly touching the woman's buttocks.
That distinction is so important. The jury did not find him guilty of the main accusation, but they did find he'd engaged in non-consensual physical contact. And the judge sentenced him hard.
18 months to 4.5 years. And the bond for his appeal was set at an almost impossible $3 million.
That bond was basically a political statement. It made sure he was going to prison. He couldn't post it. He had to surrender to authorities while he was still recovering from injuries he got just days before in the incident that changed everything.
The Quad Studios ambush.
And Tupac's immediate, unwavering belief was that the whole sexual assault case was a setup.
Right. He was convinced it was orchestrated by associates he was already feuding with, specifically Jacques Haitian Jack Agnet and James Henchman Roseman. He saw the legal attack and the physical attack as part of the same campaign against him.
Which brings us to November 30th, 1994. The event that didn't just fuel a rivalry, it ignited a war.
He was lured to the Quad recording studios in Times Square. They told him he was needed for a $7,000 recording session. He needed the cash for his legal fees.
And in the lobby, 3 men ambush him. They rob him of his jewelry, which was worth about $40,000, and then beat him at gunpoint.
He resisted, and that's when he was shot 5 times. In the head, the groin, the hand.
His response to nearly being killed was just pure defiance. Against his doctor's advice, he checked himself out of the hospital just hours after surgery.
And showed up at the Manhattan courthouse the very next day for his sexual abuse verdict. In a wheelchair, with his head wrapped in bandages.
It was pure theater. A public performance of invincibility. He was telling the world, you shot me, but you didn't kill me, and I'm still here to face your charges. It just solidified his image as this warrior who refused to fall.
While he was serving his time, he was recuperating at the home of the actress Jasmine Guy, and the sources say his security detail was fascinating.
It was. He was being guarded by members of the Fruit of Islam and former Black Panther members. Even at his most vulnerable, he was protected by that revolutionary network he was born into.
Okay, so this brings us to the feud. The famous East Coast-West Coast rivalry.
It had been simmering for a while, the tension between Death Row Records on the West Coast, run by Suge Knight, and Bad Boy Records on the East Coast, run by Sean Combs, Puff Daddy, and featuring the Notorious B.I.G.
But the Quad shooting was the catalyst. It was the point of no return.
And when he got out of prison in October '95, which only happened because Suge Knight posted that massive $1.4 million bond 2-pack, immediately signed with Death Row.
Which basically made the feud corporate, geographical.
He was completely convinced, and he said it publicly, that Combs, B.I.G., and henchmen had either set up the ambush or at the very least they knew about it.
And then B.I.G.'s track, Who Shot Ya, comes out a few months after the shooting.
And even though B.I.G. and Combs always maintained the song was recorded before the incident and wasn't about Tupac, he took it as a direct, insulting mockery of his near-death experience. It was the ultimate provocation.
And Shakur's response was, well, it was not subtle. He dropped the diss track, hit him up.
And that wasn't just a lyrical jab. It was a military-grade declaration of war.
Yeah.
It completely shattered the normal rules of rap beef.
In Hit 'Em Up, he doesn't just threaten B.I.G. and Combs. He calls himself the bad boy killer. He threatens violent payback against their entire empire, their associates, everyone. It was intensely personal, explicit, and violent.
It escalated the rivalry from a lyrical contest into a genuine, highly dangerous conflict that just consumed the music world.
And we should note his theory about being set up. For years, people debated it. But in 2011, a convicted murderer named Dexter Isaac issued this detailed confession.
He did. He said he was one of the gunmen hired by James Henchman Roseman to rob and shoot Shakur at the studio. That confession, years later, basically provided a posthumous vindication for what Tupac had believed all along.
And beyond these huge, career-defining conflicts, he was just constantly dealing with other legal friction. The sources detail a 1991 lawsuit he filed against the Oakland Police Department.
That was from a police stop for jaywalking where he was choked and had his head slammed on the pavement. He filed a $10 million police brutality lawsuit,
which was settled out of court for around $43,000. But interestingly, the source also notes that this specific incident is what triggered his autoimmune disease, alopecia, which is why he started shaving his head.
And then there was also that tragic wrongful death suit in 1995. After one of his concerts, a 6-year-old boy, Quide Walker Teal, was fatally shot by a bullet from a gun registered to Tupac.
While Tupac claimed the gun was dropped and went off by accident, the family's civil suit was settled for between $300,000 and $500,000.
The sheer volume and severity of all these legal incidents, police brutality, attempted murder, sexual assault, wrongful death, it just reveals a life that was constantly lived at the intersection of fame, volatility, and real danger.
His last 2 years after getting out of prison were just characterized by this incredible, almost manic level of productivity.
He was fueled by his contract with death row, driven by that Machiavelli philosophy he developed in prison. His output was just relentless.
And the ultimate expression of that is the Don Illuminati, the 7-day theory, which came out posthumously under the name Machiavelli.
The creation timeline for that album is just mind-blowing. The sources say the lyrics were written and recorded in only 3 days. The mixing took just 4.
That's the 7-day theory.
Exactly. And it's a work that really showcases that philosophical shift. It combines his prison readings with this intense, raw, personal hurt, rage, and vendetta against his enemies. The emotional power of it comes from the fact that it was created under such immense pressure.
But before that final raw artistic statement, he hit his absolute commercial peak with All Eyes on Me, released in early '96.
This was the first ever hip-hop double album, which was a clever way for him to satisfy 2 of his album requirements under the Death Row contract.
And this album is a definite shift in theme. His debut was all politics. All Eyes on Me mostly moves away from that. It's about celebrating this triumphant, opulent, and often violent gangsta lifestyle.
Think of tracks like Ambitions as a Rita and California Love, and the public responded. The album was certified 10 times multi-platinum diamond status by 2014. It just solidified his massive commercial reach.
But to only talk about the sales figures is to miss the real genius of his artistry. His technique, which he honed at the Baltimore School for the Arts, that's what made him unique.
His early producer, Greg Shotji Jacobs, had that incredible vocal analysis.
I love this quote.
He laid out this whole taxonomy of rap delivery. He said Slick Rick rhymed from the nasal palate, nos from the back of his throat, and pack from the pit of his stomach, which is where his power came from.
From the pit of his stomach. That sound, it had so much weight, so much passion. It was visceral.
And it's attributed to the influence of great orators he grew up idolizing, like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. He approached the mic like a political speaker at a rally, using his volume and his inflection to just command your attention.
And his training went beyond just delivery. He had a signature production technique of stacking or layering his vocals. You can hear it so clearly on Dear Mama.
This is where you meticulously overlay multiple vocal tracks, repeating phrases, adding echoes to get a thicker, raw, more emotional sound.
And we should probably pause and emphasize why that's so significant. To master vocal stacking, you need extraordinary precision and rhythm control. If the tracks are even slightly off, the whole thing just sounds muddy and messy.
And the sources confirm that this highly disciplined control of rhythm and timing, it's a skill he learned directly from his formal training in jazz, poetry, and theater. He was applying high art precision to raw street lyricism.
And that's why he got such high literary praise from his peers. Nas, another lyrical giant, said, I put Tupac beyond Shakespeare.
And Eminem called him the greatest songwriter of all time. He wasn't just seen as a rapper. He was seen as a master working within a lyrical tradition.
But sadly, this incredible artistic output was just abruptly and violently cut short on the night of September 7th, 1996 in Las Vegas.
Tupac was there for the big heavyweight boxing match, Bruce Seldon versus Mike Tyson at the MGM Grand. He was with Suge Knight and their whole entourage celebrating a huge year for Death Row.
And the conflict that sealed his fate happened right after the fight. In the hotel lobby, one of Suge's associates spotted Orlando Anderson.
Anderson was a Southside Compton Crip who had allegedly robbed a Death Row associate earlier that year.
And the surveillance footage is clear. It shows Tupac and his crew initiating an assault on Anderson, beating him badly right there in the lobby.
After that very public fight, Shakur and Knight headed out on their way to a Death Row nightclub, Club 662.
They were in Knight's black BMW, and there was this strange little moment just before the tragedy. They were pulled over by Vegas police.
For playing music too loud and having missing license plates, but they were quickly let go.
And then, about 15 minutes later, around 11:15 p.m., they're stopped at a red light on Flamingo Road. A white four-door Cadillac pulls up right alongside them.
An occupant rolls down the window and just opens fire.
Shakur was hit 4 times, in the arm, the thigh, and twice in the chest. One bullet punctured his right lung.
Knight was grazed by a fragment, but was able to drive the severely wounded Shakur away from the scene.
Tupac was rushed to the University Medical Center. Doctors performed multiple surgeries. He was heavily sedated, placed on life support.
And 6 days later, on September 13th, 1996, Tupac Amaru Shakur died from internal bleeding. He was pronounced dead at 4:03 p.m.
The immediate aftermath had this unique and defiant final act that the sources detail. Members of his group, the Outlaws.
They followed a line from his song Black Jesus. They mixed some of his cremated ashes with marijuana and smoked them. A final tribute.
And we have to bring this history right up to the present day for you, the listener. The murder was unsolved for decades, which fueled endless speculation.
But in September 2023, the case took a definitive turn. Police arrested Dwayne Keefe D. Davis,
who the sources identify as Orlando Anderson's uncle and the alleged mastermind of the whole plot.
Davis has pleaded not guilty, but he is now officially set to stand trial in February of 2026. This means the final chapter of Tupac's life, that violent ending, is finally, after almost 30 years, entering a phase of legal resolution.
Even in death, Tupac's cultural footprint just expanded exponentially. It cemented him as a true global icon, way beyond hip-hop. Rolling Stone ranked him among the 100 greatest artists of all time.
And his personal blend of characteristics, that confounding mix of, ladies' man, thug, revolutionary, and poet,
Right.
It completely altered the public's idea of what a rapper could be. Bed said he is the most copied MC of all time.
His aesthetic is still iconic. The bandana tied in the rabbit ear style. It became the symbol of defiance. The sources note his influence is generational. 50 Cent said every rapper who came up in the 90s owes a debt to Tupac.
Either because they copied him directly or because they had to actively define themselves in opposition to him.
And that revolutionary intellectual core of his identity just continues to resonate. They posthumously released his handwritten childhood poems, and they deal with these incredibly mature themes of Black liberation, mass incarceration.
And he signed them. Tupac Shakur, future freedom fighter. The political commitment was there before he was even a teenager.
And maybe the most powerful symbolic gesture that connects him back to those roots was the decision about his final resting place.
On the 10th anniversary of his death in 2006, his mother, Afeni, chose Soweto, South Africa, for the interment of some of his ashes.
And that decision was so deeply symbolic. Soweto is known globally as the birthplace of the South African struggle for democracy and against apartheid.
By taking his remains there, Afeni explicitly linked her son, the American rapper, to a global history of Black resistance. It elevated his story way beyond the East-West rivalry.
And that elevation is confirmed by how he's been recognized in academia. In 2003, Harvard University co-sponsored a symposium called All Eyes on Me, Tupac Shakur, and the Search for the Modern Folk Hero.
They were analyzing his impact not just on music, but on sociology, on narrative.
The English scholar Mark Anthony Neal came up with what is, I think, the most insightful label for the paradox. He called Tupac a thug nigga intellectual.
Neal described him as an organic intellectual, someone who had that rare gift of making intellectual discourse questions about fate, justice, power, making it all accessible to ordinary people.
He spoke the language of the street, but he had the analytical mind of an activist.
And his global reach was studied by the University of Oslo in 2012. They had a course analyzing his influence on contemporary culture.
The source noted references to him popping up everywhere, from Barack Obama's slogan about changes to Palestinians and Israelis longing for peace in the Middle East.
His song Changes, in particular, just transcended its original context. It became this universal anthem for anyone wanting societal improvement.
And the formal honors keep coming. He got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2023. And Changes was even added to the Vatican's online playlist in 2009.
A truly unexpected endorsement.
And his legacy is still supporting the arts that trained him. His lifelong friend, Jada Pinkett Smith, donated $1 million to the Baltimore School for the Arts and named the new theater in his honor.
The money flows right back to the place that taught the revolutionary how to structure a tragedy.
Finally, you can't ignore the raw commercial power he still has, that 2012 Coachella performance.
The hologram, which wasn't technically a hologram, but that's what everyone called it.
Right. Seeing him perform with Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, it spurred massive sales gains for his entire back catalog. It proved that decades later, the demand for his presence, for his art, is still immense.
So what does this all mean?
We've meticulously traced the life of a man born to Black Panther parents, named for an Inca revolutionary, trained in ballet and Shakespeare. And that background, it gave him this unique ability to synthesize political rap with street reporting.
He was propelled to just astronomical fame by rage and by poetry, only to be consumed by the very gang violence he was documenting and, eventually helping to fuel.
His legacy is defined by the compression of his tragically short life. The legal struggles, the shootings, the prison sentence. They didn't stop his art. They fed it.
The rage, the vendetta, the paranoia, it all drove that hyper-productive final 2 years. It gave us diamond albums and the incredible intensity of Machiavelli, his unique ability to fuse the highly political, the deeply poetic, and the hyper-violent. That's the pattern that defines his influence.
We tracked him from his birth, framed by the Panther 21 trial, all the way to his mother, choosing Soweto as a final resting place, anchoring him to a global history of resistance. His life was the physical embodiment of one generation's struggle spilling into the next era of American violence.
Which raises an important question for you, the listener, especially now with a definitive suspect, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, set to stand trial in 2026. When that final legal chapter of Tupac's story is finally written, can that outcome ever truly separate the revolutionary legacy, the poet, the intellectual, the martyr, from the organized gang violence and intense personal conflicts that tragically engineered his ending?
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.